So generally I try to keep this channel very fact-based and leave my opinions off to the side, but there is one element of the Star Wars canon that I've been particularly critical about, that period of time after the Battle of Endor and between the Battle of Endor and the final collapse of the Empire. And it was something that I was fairly critical on in the early days of this channel, but a lot has changed. So I figured today we can discuss how the Disney canon has handled that period after the Battle of Endor through the collapse of the Empire, and how they really have made some serious improvements to the flaws that the canon had when Disney first picked it up. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So in 2013, Star Wars officially became a Disney property, and the canon was basically erased, minus the core movies and the Clone Wars TV show. This created basically two sort of realms of Star Wars lore, canon and legends. And mostly on this channel, I focus on canon content because it's more streamlined. And I think there's a lot of pros that came from this transition, but there was one thing that I was really critical about, especially in the early days of this channel when there wasn't quite as much content around this period of galactic history, and it's the days immediately following the Battle of Endor. So, just a brief recap. Following the Battle of Endor, the Empire, which at the time was still the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen, began a rapid downward spiral until just a year later, at the Battle of Jakku, they were ultimately defeated and signed the Galactic Concordance, formally ending the Galactic Civil War. Now, originally, that's basically the end of the Empire in canon. According to canon, at least in the original first few years of Disney's ownership of the IP, that within 2 years of that, the Empire had basically been completely erased from the galaxy. All of their naval forces and military forces had been dismantled, and the Empire was firmly a thing of the past. And I took some pretty great issue with that concept. The very nature of the Empire means that its collapse would be slow and violent. It is a massive militaristic force that was a functional galactic government for 20 years. So its collapse is not something that just happens overnight. It doesn't happen in a year. We're talking about a massive fleet of Imperial warships, an army almost beyond comprehension, that's how big it is, and a galactic-spanning bureaucracy full of military and political leaders, all of whom are going to vie for their own power in the aftermath of the Emperor's death at the Battle of Endor. All of this leads to a chaotic scene that logically breaks down eventually to a series of warlords and squabbling imperial dictators trying to use what power and military forces they have left to sort of maintain their own personal little empires. This is exactly how it happened, by the way, in Legends. The Empire took 25 years to fully collapse, and even then it still hung around in its own little way as the Imperial remnant. And that's something I would have liked to see more directly in canon, but in the original version of canon and the way Disney originally presented it, they sort of seemed to really want to sweep the Empire under the rug and move on, and made things just too punctual. I have no problems with the series of events they gave us. I actually think the series of events makes some sense. It's just the time frame of them. If they had taken that 1 year and stretched it out to 5, I would have been more accepting. But they didn't, and instead the Empire loses at the Battle of Jakku just a year after the Battle of Endor, and that's the end of the Empire. Originally. That was my biggest complaint about Disney canon when they came in and took over Star Wars, is the way they handled the collapse of the Empire, the massive bureaucracy, and the aftermath of the end of the most militarily powerful government the galaxy has ever seen. That being said, shows like The Mandalorian and Ahsoka have put into perspective that the Empire is not gone after the Battle of Jakku. The Battle of Jakku represents the formal surrender of the Empire. Yes, as a political institution, the Empire itself stopped existing as a single entity following the Battle of Jakku and their defeat there. And there's a lot of forces working against the Empire, basically immediately from the Battle of Endor. There's Operation Cinder and Palpatine's post-death plan that basically involves burning the galaxy down since they failed him. There's the beginning of divisions within Imperial leadership, which seems to lack the sort of stability needed to maintain control, and then ultimately the growing momentum of the now New Republic. But all that being said, the Empire as a massive institution does not stop existing from a real sense at the Battle of Jakku just on paper. So, while the New Republic can point to that moment as the moment the Empire stopped being a real threat, the end of the war, that wasn't really the case. That's the end of the formal Imperial government, but all across the galaxy, small warlords who had their own Imperial fleets, moffs, governors, generals, admirals, simply went their own way, took their fleet, their soldiers, and decided to carve out their own slice of the galaxy, and that led to a series of small Imperial remnants and squabbling warlords fighting across the galaxy, and this is something that The Mandalorian in particular has gone on to show us quite distinctly with characters like Moff Gideon and his little slice of the Imperial remnant, who continued fighting on long after the Battle of Jakku. We're talking 4 or 5 years after the Battle of Jakku. And this plays in well to what the Empire was. I mean, even when Palpatine was alive, it was all about power grabs and individual personal gains. We saw Imperial officers backstabbing each other to try to get a little bit further up that totem pole. So you think if the guy at the top is gone and the framework that supports all that is gone, it's not just going to disintegrate into nothing, it's going to disintegrate into a bunch of small factions fighting each other for that same control, but instead of fighting in a boardroom or backstabbing someone with some intelligence they got on maybe failures of their personal operations, it's going to be fought on little battlefields between different sects of Imperial loyalists, with the New Republic trying desperately to hold on to control through all of that. And that's basically exactly what we see in The Mandalorian, which is why I think that show in particular, and the other shows that take place around that period of galactic history, Ahsoka, and to a lesser extent the Book of Boba Fett, what those shows really bring to the canon is fixing that discrepancy that was there from when Disney initially took over. So, at the end of the day, I would actually call this problem more or less fixed. I think it does make sense that from an institutional standpoint, the Empire could collapse in a year, but the physical entity that is the Empire, its military forces, its command structure, would continue on beyond that. But all of this stems from the Battle of Endor and the Empire's defeat at the Battle of Endor. But did it have to be a defeat? I did a video earlier this week talking about what the Empire could have done differently at the Battle of Endor to maybe see a more favorable outcome there. If you'd like to learn about what the Empire could have done differently to win the Battle of Endor and make all of this discussion completely irrelevant, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I'd like to let me know down in the comments what you think of the way Disney ultimately has handled the period after the Battle of Endor, and in particular the period after the Battle of Jakku with what's left of the Empire. Do you think it makes sense that the Empire sticks around for a while in an unofficial capacity as, bickering warlords, or do you think it really does just make sense that they collapse in a year and within 2 years they're completely gone from the galaxy, no ships or troops left, just a memory? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars or anywhere else in science fiction, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.